Welcome to the Book of Urm, Chapter 14, Sinthia. Sinthia. Piecora, Karui, Vinexi, and Serpendis were all taken within the hospitality of the Abrignalians high above the forest floor of Kiahalla, the encircling forest that surrounds Sinthia, home of the Eldar, also called the Undying Lands, for the Eldar are immortal. Although initially planned to stay overnight and leave in the morning, the days led to weeks as the companions received healing, nourishment, and even joy from the little tree gnomes. They wandered as esteemed guests freely among the many avenues and thoroughfares of the ancient forest's upper canopy. They strode the branches and bridges by day with the cool winds of the Fey realm in their faces, and slept soundly beneath the open stars in thick beds of moss and blankets made from felted layers of woven ghee, the Abrignalian word for the multi-purpose, translucent gossamer material the gnomes made for so many things, including wall panels, wind catchers and sun collectors, paper and literature, clothing, furniture, adhesives, ropes, swings, bridges, and more. Gradually, they learned the technique of the throat voice and how to roughly speak and understand Abrignalian enough to pass simple information along. The Abrignalians viewed Serpendis as the leader and speaker of the companions, as they were convinced he was a druid, or at least had druidic powers. Despite his efforts to sway them otherwise, Piecora encouraged the behavior by siding with the Abrignalians, arguing that it only helped to serve their relations with the Abrignalians if they had one main voice to represent the companions. But more to the point, she thought it was irresistibly funny, and each time she had the opportunity to contribute and encourage the perceived leadership role of Serpendis, whether through Hero or on her own, she did so with subtle mockery and infused humor that only the companions would understand. She even sometimes recruited Karui to employ her shamanic sorceries in creating illusions of druidic powers on behalf of Serpendis without his knowledge. And all too often he was just as surprised as the Abrignalians at these effects. Once on a clear, dark night with no moon in the sky, Serpendis and Motzeltvag were seated in front of each other in a heated debate over his status as druid among his companions. While Serpendis was speaking animatedly, Siru appeared behind him, and the violet, glowing panther spirit nuzzled against Serpendis's head, nearly knocking him over. When Serpendis persisted with his argument, Siru flopped on top of him and curled up like a fully domesticated family cat twice the size of Serpendis's torso, bathing the entire human in deep, purple ethereal light. "You cannot help yourself. You are Druvai. You have the powers, yet you cannot control them. Bogian Kremaran willing, I pray one day you will accept it," Motzeltvag said, standing and leaving. That was the end of the druid or no druid discourse regarding Serpendis, as thereafter he reluctantly accepted the role. Nearby, he could hear Piecora cackling with laughter. One grey morning, Serpendis and Vinexi sat on the edge of a narrow tree limb, with their legs dangling into the rising morning mist. Vinexi wore a tunic made from guich that also served to wrap and protect the scar that ran down the middle of his chest and belly. Piecora and Kari sat nearby practicing their throat voice techniques and complex Abrignalian language with each other. Hero was somewhere far below, hunting for breakfast. "Tell me about that scar, lad," Serpendis said. "I'm ready to hear the tale now, since there's some time between us and that awful event. I think I recall hearing it when it happened, and I was so stricken with fear, I ran blindly into the night without a single logical thought until I was captured. They must have completely disemboweled you. How did Karui possibly put you back together?" Piecora and Karui stopped practicing and looked over at Vinexi with concern on their faces. I don't know what happened, said Venexi. Honestly, I don't. I only have their account of it. He gestured weakly at Piecora and Karui. Piecora came closer, and Karui followed. I saw most of it, Piecora said. When the circle was broken, they grabbed Venexi and pulled him into the darkness just as the circle blew up in flames. I leapt through the fire after him, swinging my hatchet at anything moving. Karui sent plumes of fire into their midst. There was so much fire, so much light. The horrors, rotted, vacant, skeletal remains of warriors, the ancient dead moving on their own, attacking us with singular purpose. Karui added in Banwaris, they were the Hyolangorn, long dead and utterly destroyed by the Eldar during the Kindred War many ages ago, lying where they were slain, their remains consumed by the forest, except in the clearing that we passed through and camped nearby, which was my fault. I did not know. How could I have known? But now that I look back on it, how could I not? The evidence was all around me, and I can see it now with total clarity. That was where it happened. Vioyen's power unleashed, like nothing the world had ever seen, at least since the beginning of the Sinthian historical record. It utterly drained her, and the toll it took from her is one reason why she sleeps in the mother tree to this day. It was a great light that burned through the forest in a straight line, originating from her. Everything died in its path. Humankind, elvenkind, and fae alike withered instantly, as well as the trees, the grass, the animals, everything. Karui stared blankly into the rising mist as she continued. Nothing ever came back from that. It is a lingering wound that cuts straight through the encircling forest that never healed and never will. And everything that died in the path of the light now festers within the soil across the entire scar, laden with Vioyen's curse. We walked right through it. Remember how heavy the air felt. Remember how there was no wind, no breeze, no respite. How much effort there was in each breath. The air hung unmoving, in perpetual stasis, as if time itself had over-ripened and grown stale. The combined scent of ages-old wildflowers blending like trapped air in a container at the bottom of the sea. Clouds of pollen suspended unmoving like dust gathered in a clear, solid molasses of invariability. Centuries of fey growth and resilience stifled by Vioyen's curse and straining against the lingering necrotic energies of countless instantaneous graves. Karui shook her head slowly. How did I not see it? How could I not know the danger we were in? Piecora placed her hand on her friend's back and said, Do not be hard on yourself, my dear friend. We all face our own trials beyond what others can see. It is called Vioyen's curse for a reason. It affected all of us and seems to grow deadlier with age. My instincts feel it may soon become unbreathable, too hazardous to even set foot in. What horrors might one day emerge from that place after baking in the soil over several ages? My only hope is that it remains contained within the boundaries set by the forest surrounding it. But when I look back at my own reaction, oh, how drunk I felt playing in the flowers and feeling the soil that I now understand is fetid with ancient, necrotic offal. It turns my stomach to think of it. But I did not see it at the time, either. Karui seemed unmoved by her friend's encouraging and comforting words. The dead are restless there. It has been several ages. The Age of Sorrow, it is called when this happened, whether they are Hyolangorn and victims of genocide, or her own people fighting and defending the forest, or the innumerable and innocent fae caught in the middle. How many lie disquieted within the scar of Vioyen's curse, their lives cut short instantly, only to rise each night to wade aimlessly through the wildflowers beneath the stars and moons, attacking anything that strays too near? What moves them so? What drives them besides the roots and flowers beneath them? Is it the remnants of Vioyen's powers still lingering to this day like a toxic residue, corrupting everything it touches? How can the powers of the Fae be so destructive of its own kind? How could the goddess queen herself, the mother of the Eldar and thus mother of us all, enact such a calamity to her own children, her own creation? How can there be any healing from this? Karui became lost for words as her emotions took over. It was the first time Serpendis saw her this vulnerable. Perhaps she didn't know Karui Lavi. Perhaps she wasn't thinking, Serpendis said calmly, reaching across Piecora and placing a hand on Karui's arm. We are all prone to react from our deepest, darkest selves that no one else can see or believe, and when we become trapped in moments of desperation, when there are no answers, no perceived solutions, and there is no time to think, we are all capable of feats that far outweigh our abilities and intentions for better or worse. Perhaps after living for so long protected by the encircling forest, the breaching of Kiahalla by the Hyolangorn was something so unexpected, so unimagined, and so calamitous to the goddess queen and mother, that she simply reacted without thought, with all of her power at once, perhaps even to her own astonishment, shame, and regret. Perhaps it is more than fatigue that causes her to sleep for so long. Like you say, what healing can there be for these lands? You can ask the same for Vioyen, who, in an instant of unbridled, desperate power, gave everything she had to save her lands and her children, but gods, at such a cost. Such a cost to herself and to the very lands and children she saved. Karui looked sideways at Serpendis, laid her hand over his and said, "You are wise, Serpendis. Wise in the ways of people and their intentions, regardless of who they are. I believe it is the way you say it is. Hearing you speak it plainly helps me understand this and many other things. The Banwa do not do this, and it does not come naturally for me to unravel the complexities of behavior. It is easier to simply react to what is in front of us." Piecora looked at Serpendis and squinted. "You surprise me, Serpendis. If you are so wise and so aware of people as Karui says, then why did you hate me so when we first met? Why was it such a chore traveling with you? Why did it take saving you, and for this whole adventure to happen for you to finally—" "Because I was an ignorant bricklayer," he grumbled, expecting to feel an inward satisfaction for cutting her off for once. But he felt nothing. They sat in silence for a long while as the mist drifted up and overhead from the forest floor below. Distantly they heard the sounds of creatures slowly emerging from slumber, crooning and crowing, growling and snuffling, preening and shuffling, to begin another day in their simple lives within Fae Kiahalla. "Tell me about Vinexi," Serpendis finally said, shoving him gently. "I want to hear what happened to him. I can't see how he could have survived from such a wound." "Well," Piecora began, "he survived because—" Piecora reacted to a powerful wave of nausea before continuing. I saw it all myself. When I leapt through the fire, Vinexi was thrown onto his back, and I thought he would be ripped to shreds by those corpses. I couldn't get to him. There were too many, and I was barely fending for myself. I thought we would be overwhelmed. I had no idea where anyone was, except there was fire all around me. Trees caught fire. The ground was burning everywhere." She stammered again before recomposing herself. "Just when I thought I was done, when I had no strength left in me, I saw—" She began breathing heavily, as if reliving the nightmare. "Vinexi screamed, and it was agony. And then there was a tearing sound, like sheets of canvas." "Gods, I heard it too, the scream and the tearing," Serpendis said, Soon after, it felt like raining all around me, and that's when I fled in madness." Piecora held her hand up to Serpendis for him to stop talking. She was slightly hyperventilating and trying to calm down. He screamed, and something came out of him. It tore him in half almost. It was. She put both hands to her face, unable to continue. "The boy is possessed by something," Karui said, calmly. "It revealed itself just as we were overwhelmed. I stood in the center of the ring, sending fire into our enemies until I, too, was grabbed and thrown to the ground. But then, from Vynexi came, I would describe it as a writhing darkness. Long, slithering appendages sprang in every direction, crushing and slicing and throwing the undead around us. A thick, black, oily deluge covered the area, putting out the fires all around us. There was a thick smell of brine that covered everything." Karui looked at Serpendis while Piecora recovered from her trauma. "That is what you felt when you described it raining around you? The remains of our enemies, annihilated by whatever dwells within this boy." Vynexi sat completely still, unmoving, staring at the ground. "When it was over," Karui continued, "Vynexi was fast asleep, and his wound closed back up on its own, but it left a terrible scar. Piecora and I tried as best as we could to recover our things and clean ourselves off." Vynexi woke up the following day, feeling the pain of his scar, but with no memory of what happened the night before. We had to describe it to him. Now, he has just as many questions as we do, but no matter how you look at it, whatever it is that's inside him, it saved all of us. We would have been consumed by the ancient remains of the Hyalangorn and perhaps assimilated into the forest ourselves, like they are. They sat in silence for a while. Then Serpendis said to Vynexi, "Lad, are you sure you know nothing of what happened? Do not keep anything from us." Something about Vynexi's eyes gave him away to Serpendis, so Serpendis decided to just sit and wait until Vynexi was ready to share. Fortunately, it didn't take long. While inside the ship's bilge, crossing the salt sea to Coast Haven from Muth, something happened that I haven't been able to explain, and I've said nothing about this to anyone, not even my dear Alice. Something visited me in my dreams one night. I have no idea when or where, as we had no concept of time or place while stuck in the darkness of the Lishkill's belly below decks. Vynexi paused for a bit before continuing. "I woke up in a cave, but it was a sea cave, covered in shells and barnacles. The light was strange, lit by effervescent colors along the walls and in the water. The air was very stale. Something rose out of the water. It was very big. It towered over me, in fact. It was all one solid mass with tentacles like that of an octopod. It looked at me with a large yellow eye, and in my mind, I heard its voice. It assured me that I would survive the voyage to Coast Haven and that I would start my new life with Alice, so long as I agreed to serve it. I asked why. Why me? It said it took pity on me and my kind. It then said, its name, Ichthyphaloxu. It would protect me from harm and those I care for, so long as I serve it. I asked it what that means, and it just said, in time. I thought about Alice, and I thought about the troubles we had before boarding the ship. I thought of the danger she would be in once her absence was discovered by her family. I knew they would come after her. Vynexi fought back strong emotions as he remembered his missing betrothed. I don't know where she is. I thought I found her here and was deceived. I would have died if it weren't for you three, and for that I owe you my miserable, measly life. But if she isn't here, where is she? We are separated, and I cannot protect her. He began sobbing into his arms. Piecora, Karui, and Serpendis looked at each other over the young Unskavian's shaking shoulders. After a few moments, Serpendis turned to Veneksi and laid both hands on his shoulders, but kept looking at Piecora and Karui. "There, lad," he said. "We are safe now, and we are together, and that alone should at least comfort you a little. None of us have any answers, but together I believe we will find our way home. We made it this far, and I feel like we have some luck on our side now. The Abrignalians are helping us, and they will take us to Sinthia when we are good and ready. As for your Alice, if she can survive the voyage from Muth to Coast Haven in the bottom dregs of a Muthan freighter, she can survive anything. And let me say this, from what I saw of the illusion of your Alice as depicted by the water horse, and what you just implied about her family, my hunch was correct about her. She is nobility, isn't she? Family doesn't like you two being together, I'll bet, if they even know at all. Perfect skin, hair and teeth, the creature that deceived you read your mind well. But this alone gives me hope. For wherever she is in Kananaya, she has her wits, privilege and manners to take care of herself. You said that you both were taken to the elves of Amedia. This comforts me, as it should you. If her family comes after her, she will be hard to find if the tapestry had anything to do with it. Trust in Rultin, and trust in me on this. When we get back to Kananaya, we'll both find your Alice, and we'll set things right." Veneksi slowly looked up at Serpendis as a wounded child sees a cajoling father. "Just answer me one thing," Serpendis said. "Did you agree to serve this whatever it is?" Veneksi stared into Serpendis's eyes, and Serpendis felt queasy. Finally, Veneksi said, "I did." "Well, there it is," Serpendis said, looking up at Piecora and Karui. "We all have this ichthi faxi ui thing to thank for helping us make it this far. Now we are among friends, gracious hosts, and interesting cuisine. We must simply rest and gather our strength for the final leg of our adventure. Personally, I cannot wait to feast my eyes on the city of Sinthia. Do you even realize my own people don't even think such a place exists, and I'm going to the city of the Eldar. Think of the music, the food, the Undying Lands, the city of immortals. Gods, to finally meet the Synthians, to know they are real. Gods, let's finally be done with this adventure and get back home so I can be the crazy old man who tells stories that no one will listen to." Serpendis expertly concealed his deep concern regarding this new revelation about Veneksi. "I must speak with Rultin when I return to Kananaya," he thought to himself. Looking up, he saw Hiero watching him from a branch high above, and wondered if Piecora were listening. After several weeks of respite with the Abrignalians high in the upper canopy of Kiahalla, Piecora, Karui, Veneksi, and Serpendis made final preparations to continue their quest for Sinthia, along with a small group of Abrignalian warriors and scouts, as well as one chronicler. Moziltwag would not be going with them, but her son Kiegri would. It was a rainy, grey morning on a wide promenade of soft moss and layers of leaves and branches that covered a crossing of several large boughs growing out from old, twisting oak trees nearby. 3 companions, 2 scouts, 3 warriors, the chronicler, and Kiegri, huddled together on the soaked bedding of the platform, checking each other's equipment and inventories. Karui sat alone among a throng of Abrignalians laughing, croaking, and chirping together to extend the farewell as long as possible, for she quickly grew to love the little tree gnomes of Kiahalla. She learned the throat voice and the Abrignalian language very quickly, and over the weeks of their stay, she spent more time with them than she did with her Serpendis, Veneksi, and Piecora. Piecora also learned the language and throat voice, but more slowly than Karui. Although she liked the Abrignali and found them fascinating, she didn't bond with them as closely as her Banwa friend. Veneksi learned neither the language nor the throat voice, and he despised being up so high. He spent the majority of his time huddled in his room and not socializing with anyone, and he would not eat their food. In fact, Piecora bade Hero to hunt small game for Vinexi, so she could cook it over a small stove of embers gathered from tree bark just so Vinexi would eat. Each time she cooked, several Abrignali stood nearby on watch in case any fire escaped from the stove. Serpendis had gotten used to Abrignalian cuisine, but secretly he missed Piecora's cooking and envied Vinexi for his special treatment. Moziltwa approached Serpendis while he was filling his Abrignalian backpack made from guyi, animal hide, branches and tree bark with enough portions of food that would fit. She was eye level with him as he was kneeling and focused on his work. "Take these gifts from me, one for each of you and my son Kiegri," she said. "Tributes to Bogian Cremaran. May they bring you good luck and safe passage." He looked up at her and found her holding 5 more of the flame feathers out to him. He took them from her, marveling at their combined heat, and said, "Thank you, matron. These are precious gifts indeed." "More than you know, perhaps," she replied. "Tell me," he said, "I keep hearing of this Bogian Cremaran. What is it, or who is it?" She droned a series of clicks and chirps that in Serpendis' mind amalgamated into the words, "The trees move as one." Mozilthwach pointed to the feathers and said, "Tribute, may she bless your travels." He wondered to himself, and thanked the matron again. Once all gear was checked and goodbyes were said, the company departed. Karui lagged behind, waving goodbye to the Abrignalians as if reluctant to leave. "Let's be off and get back home before you become married to one of them," shouted Piecora jovially. For the rest of that day and into the evening, they wandered over an endless network of branches and boughs of all sizes that swayed ceaselessly like the open sea, until they finally stopped to camp within the nook of an old tree where its entire top half had been blown off by a lightning strike long ago. All that remained was a dark hollow, large enough to fit all of them comfortably. The place was well known to the Abrignalians, and they called it Mbigi Wathlagu, or Stormscar Hollow. They unfurled and secured their geyi pods, Abrignalian tents that looked like insect cocoons, and hung gaik panels here and there to conceal them from predators. Karui's ritual circles were not an option here in the upper reaches of the forest, yet the dangers here were far less than they were on the ground at night. Still, precautions were necessary against such nocturnal threats as giant bats, owls, and other flying creatures, as well as large snakes that inhabited the trees, and other more strange things that scuttled, slinked, crawled, and slithered among the branches at night. They awoke to bands of early sunlight, drifting diagonally through rising plumes of morning mist. They feared the mist less up here than on the forest floor, where it was more concentrated. In fact, in the canopy of the forest, one was less prone to deviate from the Fey realm into some other world of existence simply because of how open and tangled the canopy was, and that it was always in constant motion from powerful winds this high above the surface of the Fey realm. Still, they waited for the mist to clear before moving, for walking among the branches within the mist with limited visibility offered other, more practical dangers, like accidentally stepping off a branch and falling to one's untimely death. To pass the time, they sat around in the hollow, ate breakfast, and chatted with each other quietly. Serpendis handed each of his friends a flame feather, and since there was one extra, he gave the one he found in the cave at the pool of Vyoyen to Kiegri, the young son of Mozilthwa. "These are gifts from the matron. They are called Huesilia, Enkrigenj, flame feathers. Modzeltwag says they are tributes to Bogian Cremaran. Kiergri chanted Bogian Cremaran several times, and then thanked Serpendis while bowing and hopping excitedly. "What is Bogian Cremaran?" asked Karui in Abrignalian to Kiergri. "The trees move as one," came the words in common Canonian to Serpendis's mind from Kiergri's droning clicks and chirps. He and his 3 other companions all looked at each other in unison. "I heard the trees move as one in Banwarez," said Karui. "And I heard those same words, only in Canonian," said Serpendis. "Aye, me as well. Only in Sienyan," Piecora confirmed. Vinexi, huddled nearby with his knees tucked up and his arms folded over them, said reluctantly, "Yes, I too heard the words, but in Unskavian." "What if it's a druid, a powerful druid, that calls itself Bogian Cremaran to the Abrignalians?" Piecora said suddenly, as if the idea just came to her. "The trees move as one. That sounds like something a self-important druid would name him or herself, doesn't it?" Serpendis stared at her as his mind connected all of the related variables and wondered why he didn't come up with the suggestion earlier, on his own. "Or a declaration of solidarity for the druidic community, and he or she represents the community as a whole," he said. Karui said, "If that were to be so, then it would be a most powerful druid, for we are in Kiahalla, which means this druid must be able to travel willingly, easily, safely, and intentionally between our realm and the Fey realm, and perhaps others. I cannot think of any druid, nor anyone or anything, that can do this." "What if it were one of the inner 3, said Serpendis. "When we first met, she drew 3 small circles, pointed at them, and looked at me, asking if I were one of them." "Right, which means she is at least aware of the organizational structure of the druids. But had she ever actually met them?" Piecora asked. "If she had to ask you if you were one of them, then doesn't that imply she doesn't know what they look like?" "Or perhaps he comes in different guises," Karui said. "For her, your rounded ears meant you were a druid. We know of at least one of the Hierophants is human, the one the Sienyans call the Hermit." "Yes, but what of the other 2? Are they also human?" asked Piecora. "I do not know," Karui answered. "The innermost circle is hidden from all except for the closest concentric circles of leadership that surround it, at least for 2 of the 3 Hierophants. Yort-Kurai is an exception. I believe there is a story throughout the ages about him in just about every culture in the world. He rules Sienya as their popular spiritual leader. He does not seem concerned about hiding himself at all." "He sure keeps a high profile," Serpendis chimed in. "As I have said before, he is known to us. We call him Lacranus, and knowledge of him isn't reserved only for the most academic or conspiratorial among us. Most Canonians know of him. And yet he goes by many names. Perhaps dozens or hundreds," Karui said. "So although his presence is known by many cultures around the world, he changes his identity, adapting it to wherever he is and whoever he is with. And so the Abrignalians know him as Bogian Cremaran," said Serpendis, summarizing Piecora's original point. "It's just a thought," Piecora said. She turned to Kiergri and asked in Abrignalian, "Can you tell us who Bogian Cremaran is? Can you describe him or her?" But Kiergri only answered as he did before, and swaying before them, the words appeared again within their minds, each in their own tongues. "The trees move as one." Days of traveling turned into weeks as the company continued their journey toward the interior of the encircling forest. At times the days were clear, with the sun bright and warm, suspended at its apex within the infinitely blue sky. There were other days when the weather was less cooperative, slowing their progress through heavy winds that moved the branches greatly. Rainstorms brought more treachery with slippery footing and low visibility. Sometimes the storms and winds were so great that all progress would be lost as the company lashed their Gaia cocoons to branches and held on for their lives. But always on mornings after these terrifying events, the early mists would reveal magnificent, kaleidoscopic rainbows in the sky and dazzling shapes of refracted colors too numerous to count. The journey was hard and arduous, and after so many days, Serpendis began to lose touch with anything he once considered familiar, and time became even more abstract than before. Only the repeated cadence of the morning, day, and night cycle existed for him as he and his friends relied solely on the guidance of the Abrignalians to safely navigate the hazardous ways of Fey Kiahalla's canopy. Neither he nor his companions had any idea of where they were or where they were going, despite having visible access to the stars at night and the rising and setting sun. Each day brought different circumstances, different dangers and adjustments to their approaches. Once they arrived at a place of open air where the Abrignalian scouts adamantly argued that there were many ways of crossing when they were here before. On another day, they encountered a colossal beehive husk that towered several stories above their heads. The buzzing within reminded Serpendis of the loud, monotonous discord of thousands of people inside one of Canonia's large stadiums during the Canonian Games. Quietly, they crept around the monstrous beehive and left it undisturbed. These and other unforeseen events contributed to the many trials of their journey, including predators. One such occasion involved a serpentine creature that reminded Serpendis of a large carnivorous eel found in the salt sea that he read about while studying at the Dolgothathan Temple Library. This particularly dreadful creature hid beneath them inside a deep cleft within an old oak's gnarled juncture between two large, spiraling, bulbous and knobby trunks. As one of the scouts drew near, the serpent sprang upwards, latching onto the scout with its jaws. Saving the poor Abrignalian victim required the entire company descending upon the giant tree eel with weapons and Karui's powers until the serpent finally released the scout before dragging it into its lair. The scout fell and tumbled down toward the ground from until Hierro descended with extraordinary speed and agility, catching the Abrignalian's backpack with his talons. Hierro then laboriously ascended back to the canopy where the company awaited. They found the scout alive, but shivering with fear and fatigue, and its leg was badly wounded. The rest of that day was spent in their cocoon camp and nursing the Abrignalian's leg back to full health, while Serpendis marveled at the resilience of the little people. On another night beneath the stars, they camped inside a gigantic, abandoned, empty nest of branches, feathers, and old detritus from the forest floor below, belonging to a giant owl named Nwurang Jling Leshil, or Silence and Shadow. According to the scouts, it was as large as a house, but flew in absolute silence, and only by the sudden disappearance of the stars above could its presence be detected. The scouts explained that it was only safe here at night, since it hunted nocturnally far from its nest. However, the scouts warned that they must leave early in the morning before Nwurang returned. The white moon was a quarter full in the sky, and the red a mere sliver, like a wound. Serpendis sat next to Vinexi on the edge of the nest and decided to question Vinexi on something that had been pressing on his mind since they met. See Alba Miluna chase Rubrimaluna's tail right out of the sky. 'Tis a good night to be under the stars. Tell me about Alice, lad, Serpendis said. Vinexi blinked and looked startled at the unexpected question. My betrothed? He asked. Yes, your beautiful love. Tell me about her, Serpendis replied. If we are to find her when we return to Cananaya, I'll want to know what to look for." I really cannot tell you anything." Serpendis placed a hand on Venexi's shoulder and said, "Now, we won't be having any more of that. I shared with you much that I tend to keep to myself, namely the tapestry. We work very hard to help Unscavians once they arrive in Coast Haven. If she came over with you, and if she's lost now somewhere back home, I need to know more about her so I can share it with Rultine. You don't understand. She's not Unscavian. She's Muthan. She's human," Venexi stammered. Serpendis turned to face Venexi. "Look at me. I already know all of that. I know she is wealthy. I know your relationship with her is illicit. I know her family doesn't approve, and probably neither does yours. You both escaped Muth for a reason, to find freedom and happiness, and to discover your own fates together. If I am to help you, I need to know more about her." Venexi's face contorted in anguish before answering. "She is of House Ostenidia, if that means anything to you." Serpendis's mind became dark with foreboding as he quickly calculated everything that came into play from what he knew about that name. Ostenidia. That is a large house indeed, isn't it? "Among the wealthiest noble houses in Muth," Venexi added. "Did you know we have a very rich relationship with House Ostenidia in Cananaya," Serpendis said. "Not many know that the queen of the city, Thessal Dargad, one of the great 7 cities of Cananaya, rules the city under the moniker Lady Album Nocta, White Knight, with her husband and king." "Did you know that she is an Ostenidian? Oh, the spectacle of that wedding according to our historical texts. There were parades in her name." "I did," Venexi said nervously. "Alice. She told me many things. About herself, her lineage, while we were together inside that ship." He wrung his hands together as if trying to peel the skin off. "You're afraid that word of her dalliance, shall we call it, will get to Lady Album Nocta." "Say not a dalliance, you old fool," Venexi shouted. His voice rang clear in the thin night air and echoed from the surrounding boughs of the forest canopy. "We are betrothed. We swore ourselves to each other." Serpendis pulled Venexi back down and said, "Stay your voice, lad, or you'll have monsters from above and below coming at us. I chose the wrong word. Gods. Fine, then. Is that what you fear? The Queen of Thessal Dargad?" "I have many fears," Venexi said darkly. There was now a sobering edge of doom that lay in his voice, unlocked and freed by his outburst. "Alalthulda Ostenidia, whom you call Lady Album Nocta, and who rules by Meclevanth Oluthruin's side over Thessal Dargad, is but only part of the problem. Yes, I am certain that word has already reached her ears, and even now she is most likely deploying resources from Thessal Dargad across all Cananaya to find her. But there is more than that, and if you are asking for all of the truth, then here it is. Alice is Alice Jägerhulst, a family line directly descended from Empress Tiafuen, the sorceress summoner of our ancient past, who first discovered ways into the hells and began relations with the fiends and devils of our ancestors, the ancestors of Unscavians, who are called, correctly, Devilkin. It was Empress Tiafuen who was responsible for our breed ages ago. It is said that Tiafuen was a sorceress of mythical powers beyond comprehension. Some of that power trickled down through many familial lines, even those who weren't the progeny of devils and humans. Alice is one of them, despite being pure human, but no one else knows except me. She showed me herself while stuck in the bowels of the Laichkill while crossing the Salt Sea. But her family does not know. To them, she is only their precious baby girl who was kidnapped by some dirty gutter-trash Unscavian. They will stop at nothing to get her back, and they will kill me slowly and mercilessly." They sat for a long moment in silence, as Serpendis tried feebly comprehending and corroborating this sudden and unexpected information with his own geopolitical knowledge and history. "Now you know why I accepted my patron at the bottom of the sea, old man," Venexi said. "Ichthyophaloxu is ancient. It was there in the beginning. It knew Tiafuin. It tells me many secrets of ancient times that would make you bleed out your petulant ears. It came to me because it presents itself to each devilkin that crosses the salt sea. It cares for my people, the Unscavians, as our Muthan rulers named us, the progeny of devils and humans, and the untold history of Muth that the world knows nothing about. Oh, you think you know us, you fools of Velastrum Tapetius. You know nothing." To Serpendis's amazement, he felt as if he were being dressed down by someone above his station, someone frustrated by Serpendis's limited world view, and who knew vastly more about the world than Serpendis's Dolgothadan education. Everything was now flipped upside down, and he felt the urge to cower before Venexi's heated gaze beneath the white quarter moon. Serpendis realized he had completely lost control of the conversation, and now Venexi had taken over. He was afraid that his relationship with the boy was at risk of completely souring, or worse. Furthermore, he also realized that the maze he found himself in was far greater than he could possibly comprehend at the moment, so he quickly abandoned all pretense of authority and gave up trying to correlate Venexi's deluge of conspiracies with his own educational knowledge. Right now, he just wanted to salvage the boy's trust in him. "Lad, please. Of course we know nothing of the plots you speak of. We are but simple lower to middle-class Canonians. I'm a merchant, Rultin's a book dealer. The rest are fishers and cobblers and ferries and farmers, and throw a few thieves' guild members in there as well, council members to the mayor. But we exist to help you," Serpendis pleaded. "If I offended, I meant nothing by it other than wanting to learn more. Gods, has this been turbulent from the start? And now I see how rude I was to you in the beginning, how wise and authoritative I thought I was. I am a fool. You are right about that. The Xianyan tells me that every day. But I will never boast to know that which I cannot know and have not lived. But don't you see, that is all the more reason to share your story with us. I beg you, treat us carefully, for we cannot know what you know, except that we only want to help you, lad. And Alice? Gods, we need to find her, for your sake and so many other reasons that I don't even fully understand. But most importantly, because you love her." Venexi slumped, disarmed by Serpendis's response. Serpendis put his arm around him. "I cannot imagine your thoughts right now, lad, especially with that thing living inside you. I feel utterly insignificant to the powers at play all around me. But know this from an old, simple fool. I'll not utter a word of this to anyone else until we reach Canonia, and we speak with Rultin. That must be where we start. Do you trust me on this?" Venexi looked at Serpendis, once again as the lonely boy lost in the vast world. "Yes," he said. "Then over time, as it compels you, speak to me of what is on your mind if you must work something out," Serpendis said. "I want to hear more about everything you spoke of tonight, every detail, but only if you trust me and feel free to do so. I'll not press you again on it." "All right, my lord," Venexi said, with a fatigued smile. Serpendis gently tousled his hair between the horns and patted the side of Venexi's face endearingly, like he would with his own nephew. Serpendis awoke one morning to someone gently shaking him. It was Kiahalla. "Come," the young Abrinalian droned, and their encampment was spread out over a network of thinning branches pulled and lashed together with their Guyi cocoon tents. Serpendis stepped out of his cocoon with Kiahalla into cool, breezy morning air. It was silent, except for the creaking of the trees and the wind blowing over loose Guyi sheets from their tents. It was dark, but an ambient glow in the eastern sky promised the sun would rise any moment now. Above, the stars were alight in the inky sky, and Alba Maluna hung high overhead toward the west like a beacon of safe harbor. Silhouetted silently against the glow in the east of the coming sunrise were his companions and the Abrignalians. Serpendis, led by Kiagri, wandered over to them, trying not to trip or make a wrong, fatal step. The whole makeshift platform of woven branches swayed gently in the crisscrossing winds, rising up and down, similar to a large ship on the open sea. "What are we looking at?" he asked. "The sunrise," Karui said. Serpendis furrowed his brow slightly, shrugged his shoulders, and thought about going back to sleep. "Notice anything different?" asked Piecora, gesturing around them. "Only that I should still be asleep and dreaming of hot, baked potatoes at the Harlot," Serpendis said groggily, running his hands through his long, thin mess of silver hair. "No mist," Karui said. Serpendis stopped, looked around, then realized why the morning felt so familiar, yet so different. When was the last morning he felt the cool breeze on his face, or could see with any clarity? For the first time since arriving in the forest, there was no mist, nor was there any rising from the ground. "Well, isn't that curious?" he mumbled, while scanning the open spaces between the branches around and beneath him. "I can't remember the last time I actually saw the morning." As the first rays of the sun peeked over the horizon, countless leagues in the distance, like a cosmic being, sending its fingers across the landscape, they all raised their hands to cover their eyes as dusky violet shadows streaked across the wide open fields and hills that lay before them. Hills, flowers, and tips of waving grass became sun-drenched where moments before there was flat darkness. The view was so vast, the distance so immeasurable, and the spectacle so wondrous, it made Serpendis's heart leap, and his breath was stolen from his chest. Struggling to form words, he gasped, "Gods! Dear Mother of Gods, is this it? Did we make it?" "Welcome to Sinthia, the Undying Lands," said Karui, turning to him and smiling. "Home of the Eldar." Thank you for listening to this chapter from the Book of Urm. If you enjoyed this reading, like and subscribe to our channel, and consider supporting us at the Book of Urm at patreon.com.